The cloud. Okay. Welcome to my TED Talk. Today we're going to be talking about the essential elements of film score. So before we start getting really into the tech part of it, I want to just do a brief overview of what you're going to be doing and some things you need to kind of know to do it as well. I've created a video series for a class that I teach at UW River Falls, and I call it the 7 essential elements of film scores. They're all short, they're all less than 2 minutes, and we'll probably watch some of them. And because there's a lot of great examples that I put together in video there. So, so that's what we're going to be talking about today for this lecture, that is. And let me just share screen. I'm just going to share screen. I'm going to go here. Okay. Minimize that. Now participants can see. Okay. And all right. Can the people online see the presentation? Okay. Now, hopefully we don't have a situation like yesterday with Phil's setup. I've done this a bunch of times. Okay. So, let's minimize this, move this out of the way. Okay. Film and game score essentials. Here we go. Sorry for the stretched images of these famous composers, but these are 3 of the most prominent ones that are out there right now. So we've got Hans Zimmer in the upper left corner. We've got Alan Silvestri, who actually did Avengers Endgame, but he also goes back all the time. He did Back to the Future. He's done Forrest Gump. He's done tons of classics. He's probably like one of the most accomplished but lesser known names in the industry. So he's one to know. And he's also very good with the technology. And then on the right, of course, the maestro John Williams, who basically in the 1970s changed the game when he brought in the full orchestra to do film scores. They'd done that originally in the early days of film scoring with Max Steiner and Alfred Newman. Then they went away from it for like a couple decades. And then along comes John Williams with the idea of using the European orchestral sound on some Spielberg movies and some Richard Donner movies like Superman, and Spielberg movies like Jaws, and Star Wars, of course. So, and he hasn't looked back since, and he's probably the most accomplished of all time. So he's a good name to know. Moving forward. So to do what we're going to do this week, there's a few things you need. Okay. There's a few things you need, not just physical things, mental things to understanding of things. Okay. So what do you need? You need an understanding of the elements of film and game music, and that's what we're going to talk about in this lecture. So the elements of it. What are the different elements? We'll go over those in a sec. You need a basic understanding of filmmaking and also video games. So you just kind of got to know a little bit about filmmaking in general. How is it done? And I've got a video series for that too. That's really basic that I'll share with you guys probably through Drive or something like that. But you just need to know the basics of filmmaking as well. Editing, I guess cinematography, production design, things like that. All of those things affect the music that you write. They all will make a change, maybe a decision in your composition, okay? Another one is understanding the technology needed to create music for film and game, okay? We talked about that a little last night, but you have to understand the technology really well to do this. You really do. We're no longer just sitting at a piano with a pen and manuscript paper and trying to visualize what it may sound like through a full orchestra by just playing the piano. Now that's certainly a way you can go, but we have such great technology nowadays, and so many people are using the sample libraries that you don't really need to do that anymore. You don't even need to be a pianist to be a film composer anymore. It's pretty great, or just a composer in general. You need an understanding of music composition. So that includes, theory, orchestration. You'll get, I think Jordan's doing an entire lecture on just orchestration at some point, and I'll talk about it a little. And then also notation, because you will at some point, now you could make a career without ever having to write a note on paper. But if you want to get into the industry for real, you will have to understand notation. You also have to understand how to go from a DAW, from recording it in MIDI or whatever, to writing it on paper. Or writing it on paper and then going to a DAW, however, whichever approach you take. So understanding, basic music composition. What's great is you probably all do already. You probably all have a pretty good foundation in composition. Usually people that come to this camp do. You also, I think it's important to have a passion for film and game music. Like that's another reason. All of you are here probably because you do have a passion for this stuff, or at least a great interest in it. Some of you, like I said, maybe window shopping, that's okay too. But to be successful in this, you have to have a passion for it. You have to want to do it. You have to want to listen to it. You have to want to listen to a film score without watching the movie, which I do all the time. And you'll actually find that sometimes it gets kind of boring because film music has a different purpose than concert music, okay? Which I'll definitely be touching on later. But you have to be able to listen to scores, recognizing techniques that film composers are doing, things like that, like recognizing the technique yesterday that we had with Philip Adamo's piece, right? That little commercial, how he had the changes, the editing changes happen exactly when the phrases change on the Paganini piece, right? Recognizing those techniques, because that is a strategy. Okay, so we're gonna watch some little short videos and I'm gonna discuss each one as we go. Again, they're all less than 2 minutes. They're very short. Something I threw together. Now, this is for a class that I teach. So some of it's for what this class is. They're actually critiquing film music, right? So they're not writing it. They're just critiquing it. They're analyzing it and critiquing it. So there'll be reference to that a little bit. So don't worry about that. But here are the essential elements of video game music. Okay, number one, orchestration. This is something that goes into it. You have to. What instruments are you going to choose? Are they going to be instruments? Are they going to be synth? Are they going to be electronic sounds? Are they going to be Eastern instruments? Okay, Eastern Asian instruments, Middle Eastern instruments, South American instruments, Caribbean, right? I tell you, film scores do not just use the European orchestra, right? That we all know really well. Film scores explore all kinds of combinations with that. Some composers like to use basically just the orchestra. Some composers like to use just electronic music, and some like to mix. Okay, I like the mixing idea. I like the idea of mixing different instruments from different regions of the world and cultures and creating new sounds, right? Another element is pacing. Jordan will be talking about this too. Pacing is the speed or tempo of the music versus the speed or tempo of what's happening on the screen. Okay, so a chase scene is usually fast, right? A car chase scene or on foot or a fight scene. It's usually like the action is happening fast, right? And there might be a lot of edits in the video. So you want music to match that, support it. So you're probably going to write music that is more energetic, maybe lots of drums that are, something that's matching the action, right? And it's probably going to be up paced versus a scene that's maybe, drawn out dialogue between two people. That's a very slow conversation in some drama or romantic comedy, right? In those situations, you're probably going to have lighter music that's not going to be moving or as aggressive or energetic, okay? So pacing is a very, very important thing. Thematic material, also known as the leitmotif. You guys know what the leitmotif is? I'm sure a lot of you do. You know who Wagner was? Richard Wagner wrote a lot of great stuff. Dun 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 dun, Die Valkyrie, and he sort of pioneered this idea of the leitmotif. And the leitmotif is basically a musical theme or idea that is associated with a character or a geographical location or even an object. Okay, so it's something that's associated with something in the film. So obviously, if you've seen The Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, these are two prime examples of the leitmotif being used. Characters have their own music. Planets have their own music. Locations have their own music, right? So you'll see the leitmotif is a very, very important thing, especially if, oh, Aiden wants in. Okay, here we go. Just let him in. So yeah, so I'm seeing this. So I'm gonna keep the chat open because I like this. F and love leitmotifs. Yes, they're great. They're important too. It's a really important concept to understand. Okay, next. This is something that you may not have to deal with this week, and you won't really, but there's something to know. Diegetic versus non-diegetic music. And what that is diegetic music is music that is actually on the screen that the characters in the film or whatever are aware of. So if a character's in their car and they turn on their radio, they hear that music, and so do we as the audience. That is diegetic music. So it's part of their world, right? Versus non-diegetic, which is just like scored music that they don't hear. It's not affecting their world or changing their world in any way, and they're not aware of it. Just good to understand the differences. And you'll see that a lot of films use both a lot of times. Silence. Another important element. Silence is basically the opposite of music, right? It's using silences in strategic ways to build tension and for other purposes, right? Now, there are film scores that have zero music. Two that come to mind, the Coen brothers, No Country for Old Men is one. Then there's movies like the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks that has basically the vast majority of it has no score. Yet the end credits by Alan Silvestri has this just beautiful piece of music. One of my favorite scores of all time is on a movie that doesn't have a score, right? Just during the end credits, and it's beautiful, okay? But understanding when to use silence, okay? Don't just have music going constantly, right? And there's these things you do with directors. That's called a spotting session. I may try to carve out some time to talk about this, but basically when a film is done, like I said, it's called a locked picture. A locked picture is when they are done editing it. They're not changing it in any way. All they're going to do now is add music. That's what the composer gets, is a locked picture. And what they do is they sit down with the director and they do what's called a spotting session. And I'll give you guys templates of spotting notes. You can actually have there's actually templates for ones that you can use for spotting sheets. And you sit down with the director and you discuss where music, one, where are we going to have music and where are we not going to have music? Two, what's the director want? What kind of music do they want? You know, and then you may be at a piano playing some ideas for them. That's what Spielberg and John Williams do. That's what a lot of them do. And sometimes they may give you what's called temp tracks. And I talked about this yesterday briefly. Temp, short for temporary tracks. A director will take music from another film or from maybe just classical music or just any music, you know, they'll just insert it into the film as a way to sort of show the composer what they're going for. Now, there's problems with that too. Did anyone see the problem with that, using temp tracks? Yes, Carl.
The director.
Say it loud enough. This mic's pretty good.
The director can become too attached to the temp music and think that it's better than anything that you can make.
Perfectly stated. The director can become too attached to their own temp music that they've used. And it may be hard for them to accept anything else. It's often hard for them to accept anything else. I know this firsthand. I would tell you just about any film composer will tell you the exact same thing. That's a major problem that they deal with, dealing with directors. And so some composers love it. Alan Silvestri, for example, loves temp tracks. I read a book he wrote, just like an excerpt, and he was talking about how it gives him direction in his score. He's confident enough that he can sway the director to like his music more, right? And it really kind of helps him see what the director's going for. And I can see that. That's very positive, right? The negative is exactly what Carl said. They just won't accept anything, and then they may fire you. They may not want to work with you because you can't, meet their needs, and so they may end up going with someone else. Bottom line is they have to be convinced, and so there's pressure there, and it's a difficult position to be in. It's probably the most difficult part of this whole thing, in my opinion, and I think Jordan might agree, is dealing with the directors and getting what they want. Because ultimately, our job is not to write what we want to write all the time. Our job is to write what they want. They're the boss. Another Alan Silvestri also quoted was saying how There's millions of dollars on the line, and the director is the sole person responsible for those millions of dollars. All the blame and accountability falls on them. If the music sucks, falls on them, not the composer. If anything is bad about it, it falls on the director. So they're under a lot of pressure. So they may be kind of difficult to work with in that situation as well, because of all the tension and pressure that they're dealing with. So just be aware of that. And I'm sure some of you might land an indie film gig here after this camp. I hope you do. Someone who's making an indie film looking for a composer. You will deal with this, okay? Especially at the indie level. Fine. Then we have one more. So genre and style. Understanding genre and style. Now, this is so important. You cannot be tied into one genre, okay? Oh, my favorite music is strictly late romantic Wagnerian opera, okay? You are not going to be a successful composer of film and game music if you are only accepting like basically one or two genres in your life, okay? You have to listen to every genre. That includes metal, punk rock, John Cage style experimental modernist music from the 20th century, Bach, Mozart. I mean, everything. You have to listen to it all. And ideally, you have a good understanding of how it's all made, all genres. Because every film is going to be different. Every film is going to call for different music. And the more prolific and versatile you are, the more work you'll get. Okay? I can't stress that enough. Understanding multiple genres and styles. Explore new ones all the time. Always be finding new ones. Balinese gamelan music, okay? You'd be amazed how much Balinese and Javanese gamelan music is used in film. Or like parts, like maybe like a drum rhythm from Balinese gamelan is used with like an orchestra or something, okay? But how would you know that if you don't know Balinese gamelan? Okay, so you really need to stay up on your genres and explore everything. Electronic music included. Synthetic electronic music. I know maybe some of us don't love the music, but I'll tell you, there's going to be a score at some point. They're going to, a film, a video game, that's going to call for that. And if you don't understand that world and can't do it, you're not going to get that gig, okay? It's about maximizing your gigs. All right, finally, and I put this one last, but it is, you know, for composers who are serious have to know this, but you can compose film scores without having to know a lot of music theory, believe it or not. You just have to have a good ear, really. Understanding music theory, though, will get you a lot further and a lot faster. Understanding harmony, chord progressions, things like chromatic mediants. I'll spend some time talking about that because that's a really popular one that's used. Understanding different techniques from music theory, understanding how harmony works, understanding melody notes versus harmony, what are the better melody notes with this chord, you know? Tension release, knowing non-harmonic tones, you know, and how they can resolve to harmonic tones, things like that. All right, enough of me talking. Well, I'll be talking in these videos, but let's watch a couple little short videos here. This first one is on pacing. And I'm not hearing it because, why? Hold on. You can hear it, the headphones. Here's why. Yeah. Give me a sec. Stop. I want this escape, please. Thank you. Huh. Hold on. Extron, which is those. That's on. Let me test something else here real quick. Oh my God, everything's freezing up. I can't see anything. Close, please. Okay. Okay. That's a zoom setting then. Extron, yeah.
Welcome back. For this series of lecture videos, I'd like to
Oh, I
discuss
wonder-
the
no.
essential elements of film scores and the strategies used to incorporate music into film to support a narrative. Here
Okay.
is my list of 7
was
technical
strange.
aspects
See.
of a film score that you should examine
Let's not
when
play
watching
that.
the films in this class and to use
What the
when
heck?
writing your essays.
Let me take
Pacing
this off.
is the tempo or
Ah,
speed of the
that's why.
music versus the tempo or speed.
Let's go here. Sorry, this is in the way. Let me close this. Here we go.
Welcome back. For this series of lecture videos, I'd like to discuss the essential elements of film scores and the strategies used to incorporate music into film to support a narrative. Here is my list of 7 technical aspects of a film score that you should examine when watching the films in this class and to use when writing your essays.
You're not writing essays, so don't worry about it.
Pacing is the tempo or speed of the music versus the tempo or speed of the visual action on screen.
Out there's a world outside of Yonkers. Way out there
In this
beyond the
early scene of the movie
city I
Wall-E,
wanna be.
notice the rhythm of the camera cuts from one shot to another. The cuts line up with the rhythm of the music.
Full of shine and full of sparkle.
The music in the longer shots is a similar tempo to the slow panning camera.
Listen, Barnaby.
In this scene in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, we have long shots panning towards each character slowly. The music is also slow and menacing to sort of foreshadow the coming fight. As the fight begins, the taiko drums begin at a moderate speed. As the fight intensifies, the drumming intensifies and the music speeds up.
Okay, so pacing, right? It's super important. It's in everything. Your speed, the speed of your music versus the speed of what's happening on the screen. Okay, there's a couple examples there. These videos I'll put out there for you guys. I'll put it in the drive so you guys can have access to this slideshow as well. But you'll see that it's a very, very important one. Okay, silence.
Silence versus music is a concept of using silence or silences as a device for a specific purpose. Some films have very little music or score, and some have a continuous score. When a film has a continuous score, a silence can seem very tense, and vice versa. In the famous shower scene in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, it begins with continuous music, which is faded out as Marion enters the shower. We have a long, tense moment of silence until her killer begins stabbing her. We then get screeching violin stabs that heighten the tension further.
So obviously that seems pretty cheesy, but that was really cool back in the day. Oops,
I had
no.
to close my computer for that part.
Oh,
And I got him doing that on video.
I'm sorry it scared you. It's so preposterous and ridiculous the way they filmed it back in 1960 that I can't be. It doesn't freak me out. The freakiest part is the twist at the end. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, diegetic versus non-diegetic music. I'm going to skip over this one because this one you're not going to use as much, but it's there if you want to watch this little video. It's just an example from the movie Wall-E, which is a lot of great examples of film scoring and sound design. There's so many great examples that are in that film. It's great. No. No. I want the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. Thematic material.
Thematic material, or the leitmotif, is a device where the music in a film is representative of a person, a geographical location, or an object of significance. The Shire, a geographical location in The Lord of the Rings, has a specific theme, as do Rohan and Gondor and Mordor. The ring itself has a musical theme. Star Wars is also well known for its use of the leitmotif. Here in The Lord of the Rings, we hear a version of the ring theme, of which there are actually many.
To his death. And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost.
In this example, we can hear the Shire theme, which also has many versions and
Shire.
alliterations.
Bag End, Bagshot Row, Hobbiton, West Farthing. The Shire. Middle Earth. The third age of this world.
In Star Wars, we are regularly given different versions of what's called the Imperial March, a theme that is famously associated with the villain Darth Vader.
Lord Vader, this is an unexpected pleasure. We're honored by your presence.
Okay. Escape, please. Don't play. Escape. Thank you. Go here. Okay, where are we? Orchestration. Here we go. Okay, so far we've seen a couple of things that I mentioned. Thematic material, leitmotif. There's so many in so many films, and a lot of times we don't notice them. But those Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, just loaded with them. Okay, let's see where we're at with the chat. Barf Vader. I actually said the villain Darth Vader, but he's kind of a anti-villain. He's a villain, then he's not a villain, but then you watch the prequels and you're like, I kind of, he just like bad circumstances led him to being a villain. So he isn't. Okay, Carl, he's not. All right, good to know. That's a talker. So we'll just leave it at that. All right, orchestration.
Orchestration is another element of film scoring. This is essentially the instruments or sounds used in the score. There are an infinite number of instrument and sound combinations. Star Wars composer John Williams loves to use European traditional orchestral instruments for his scores, while composers like Thomas Newman, who composed for WALL-E and many others, blends European orchestral instruments with non-traditional instruments and even electronic music. Some film music composers like Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross almost exclusively use synthetic electronic music in their scores. Some composers will use traditional Eastern, Asian, and Middle Eastern instruments as well. This scene in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon depicts a busy restaurant. We hear Chinese flutes, a zither, which is a Chinese stringed instrument, and a vocalist, all playing a light melody to complement the setting. As the fight ensues, taiko-style drums enter the mix for added effect. The flute plays an Eastern pentatonic melody. Pentatonic is a 5-note scale, a collection of 5 different pitches. And it is very typical in Eastern Asian culture and martial arts films.
Okay. So far, any questions? No, I did not press play. I pressed next slide. Thank you. Okay. How are we doing on time? We are getting close. What time is it? 9:03. No, is it 9:03? No, it's 9:19. The clock on here is very wrong. Just be aware if you're ever presenting up here, that clock right there is wrong. Okay, so let's keep going here. So style genre, again, this one, of all the ones, of all of these elements, for me personally, I think this might be the most important one. You really have to be versatile and understand the genre.
Style and genre are yet another thing to think about when you're watching the films in this class.
We're not in a class.
As we've heard already, some films use the European orchestral music formula that's similar to the Romantic era composers. Some of you might know Beethoven, Wagner, Dvorak, Tchaikovsky, and Gustav Holst. Some films use electronic music in sort of as an ambiance tool, sort of add to the overall aesthetic and to also complement some of the orchestral music. Some use diegetic music in lieu of a score. Regardless of the genre chosen, you must ask yourself if the choice is appropriate and if it works well or even contrasts well in the film. In this scene in Guardians of the Galaxy, we have Star-Lord enter a dark and cavernous region. Thus far, the scene gave the audience a feeling of tension and had a serious tone. To lighten the mood, the music supervisor, who's in charge of the final decisions with the music, chose to use the upbeat 70s pop song Come and Get Your Love in lieu of a score cue. The song uses the standard American rock band instrumentation. This type of contrast is actually appealing to many, and it's what separates this film from others.
No, I don't know why it does that. Okay. And then finally, music theory, which we don't need to watch this video, but I know you guys understand what music theory is at this point. I think most of you do. So I'd like to open it up for questions for a few minutes. If you have any questions about this stuff, these are, like I said, the things you should know to get into this, right? You have to understand some of these things, at least the basics of these. And even, like I said, filmmaking in general, it's good to know. Because that's what you're writing for. Video games, you know. How do you write for a video game? How do you write for someone running through some woods in a video game? You know, like, what do you do? What if it's in a video game where the environment changes? Well, you could take a note out of the book from the Legend of Zelda, for example, right? Or any RPG game that's sort of open world. Oftentimes, when a player moves from one geographical location to another, the music will change. Right? Mario is pioneered this in the 80s. You're in the upper level, you go to the lower level when you go down the pipe, all of a sudden, you know, it's like ominous and dark. Yes. Right. Yeah. So Koji Kondo was very limited at the time. In fact, video game music was very young, very new. And he was able to write these incredible melodies. He's a melodist at heart, right? A true master of the melody. And he just sat there with 8-bit technology and which I can show you guys how to create 8-bit technology with a simple synth. Maybe we'll do that. I'll just show you guys how to create that old school sound with just a synth, really synth plugin. I'll do maybe later today. But yeah, but he had an understanding of the game. He understood the different locations, The different, like when you get to a boss, okay, the music changes. When you get to a cutscene, like a lot of games nowadays have cutscenes, right? It's like you're watching half a film, you're playing half a game, you know what I mean? In some of them. Some games takes like a half hour just to start playing because of cutscenes, like any like Metal Gear Solid type game. There's so much like cutscene footage throughout, and then that cutscene is basically like a film, and they're scoring it, right? And they're scoring it well. So there's a lot more to video games than people think, that it's just like the old, like Pong, you know, like used to be. Yeah. It was more of a sound design than it was music, really. So yeah, but the elements of film scores are the same for video games. It's just video games have taken on a different character. For example, in a video game, here's a great one: Super Mario World, 1991, I want to say, early 90s. Introduced Yoshi, the character Yoshi, right? And if you're playing that game, it's playing the music, right? You're going along, it's playing some music. When you get onto Yoshi, they all of a sudden the music adds like a little little drum, light drums. When you jump off Yoshi, the drums stop. And this is called, like, I call this, people call this interactive music in video games. It's where something that you do on the screen can cause the music to change. Okay, advancing to another geographical location is part of that. Getting to a boss is part of that. Jumping, getting on a horse where the music changes all of a sudden, or getting into a car, whatever, a vehicle, and the music changes. That's interactive video game music. It's really cool. Mario Kart does it. Yes, thank you, Aiden. So these are the things, before we start getting into the tech, you got to understand these things, okay? You got to know what to do, not just how to do it. I'm going to spend a lot of this week showing you how to do it, but I needed to have this intro of what to do first. What do you want to do? What kind of music? And so I encourage you all, if you have Spotify or whatever you listen to music on, make a playlist of film scores. Okay? Start putting together a playlist of film scores, because I'll tell you, when you're composing, it's really nice to go there and listen to stuff for inspiration or reference techniques. It's really helpful. I can give you guys a list of composers to check out. But start with just putting some of your favorite movies that have great music in them. Start with the big ones: Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. There's a million Marvel movies now. Some of that music kind of gets generic sometimes to me. It's just like generic comic book music. So try to expand your horizons, though. Okay, I really want you guys to be listening to way more than just what you are listening to now. I pride myself in having knowledge of many different genres, and I think you should all as well. It's a valuable tool. You'll get more work. Any questions? People that are zooming in, any questions? Well, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, and I'm sure a lot of you know a lot of this stuff already. Was I supposed to be in the classroom? I don't think so, Aiden, right? I'm a newbie. As long as you're on Zoom. Yeah, you don't have to be in the classroom as long as you're on Zoom. Sweet. Okay, well, let's end it there, huh? And then Jordan's going to be up next in a few minutes if you're in that class. And then another, whenever my next one is, we're going to start digging into the DAWs. Okay, we're going to start digging into the MIDI. So laptops, everything, technology. And I would come to the classroom if you can. It's going to be easier for all of us, myself included, to present and to share and whatnot. So I want to spend the whole time basically trying to get you guys up to speed with your DAWs, getting your workflow started, so you can start on this commercial and that you can start on your other project as well. All right, thank you. That's a wrap.